The Chaser Report is recorded on Gadigal land.
Striving for mediocrity in a world of excellence. This is the Chaser Report.
Hello and welcome to the Chaser Report with Dom and Charles. The Wallabies have had a shocker in France. Our worst loss in World Cup history, getting demolished by Wales 40 points to 6. What on earth went wrong? How did Coach Eddie Jones, with one of the best CVs in the game, stuff things up so badly, winning just one game this year and losing 7? And did he take a meeting with Japan about going and working back there during a World Cup where he was supposed to be coaching our national team? One man who is fired up about this is former Wallaby and prolific author and journalist Peter FitzSimons of the Sydney Morning Herald. He has written in the Herald today that Jones has to go pronto, straight away, out the door. He says there's light at the end of the tunnel, but Jones needs to be off at the next stop. In a moment, Peter FitzSimons will join us on the line from France. Peter FitzSimons, welcome back to the Chaser Report.
Well, you've taken your time, Dom, to get me on the Chaser Report. Top 3 carry 1 to track 2. It must be, 7 years? And I would have come on earlier, but unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, I've never been invited.
Didn't you come on to talk about the Republic with Charles at one point?
Oh, I did too.
You ran us through the FitzSimons model. But you talk so much about that I'm not surprised. Charles is quite forgettable. I wasn't there that day. I was busy. So I appreciate you coming back live from France, of all places, where you've been following the Wallabies. Are you still glad you made the trip, given the column you've just written about the worst?
Look, I played rugby for 4 years in France. I've got a lot of French friends. I love being back here and seeing a lot of my old mates and people I played with and against. And the World Cup brings people from all over the world. So I call it the carnival of the cauliflower ears. You've got to have broken nose and cauliflower ears or you don't quite fit in. But it's been wonderful on that account. But the Wallabies, it's been quite gutting to see it up close. And I must say, completely mystifying. You know, there's a lot of things I don't understand. I went about 6 weeks ago, or 5 weeks ago, I went to my first Wallaby training in 20 years and attended their first training session the Wallabies had in Paris. There were 2 drones in the sky. There were 3 guys on computers at one end feeding information from those drones. They had 30 Wallabies on the field going through various drills and things. There must have been at least that many coaches and support staff. It was a seriously well-resourced operation, operating at a level that I could only have imagined when I was playing 35 years ago. And yet, despite that level of sophistication, when we came down to showtime playing against Fiji, the ball went up twice in the second half. Nobody called out, mine, that's what you'll remember, Dom, from the Sydney Grammar under 12. That's what you were taught. The ball goes up. Seriously, the ball goes up, somebody's got to call out. And this was, highly paid professionals, and nobody called out mine. And the ball bounced between, and in the first occasion, Fiji gathered and scored what proved to be effectively the winning try. With a minute to go in that same match, the Wallabies were down by 7 points behind Fiji, and there was only one way. You don't have to understand rugby intimately, the professional game, to understand there was only one way we could have won that game. That was to hold onto the ball with 60 seconds to go and charge it downfield. Everybody, hold it, don't kick it, hold it, lay it back. If everybody does it, we keep doing it without turning it over, we're going to score a try and level the scores. Instead of that, they kicked and they kicked and they kicked again. And it's just incomprehensible to me because I don't speak to you as an expert on rugby of the modern game. I'm not. I don't understand the modern game. But I can tell you this, with a minute to go, you don't kick it away. And I've talked to other guys that do understand it, and say, look, I don't really get this, but was that as mad as I think it was? And the answer was yes. Was it as mad as I think it was to have 7 penalties in the second half against Fiji where the tackled player goes down, the ruck forms over the top of him, and we get penalised 7 times. Now, what if it was for not releasing the ball or standing over or I don't know what it was, but it was 7 penalties for the same, in the same area when we were pressing their line. We come up to the game against Wales, and the ball's not thrown in straight, and we've got a line out where we're pressing their line to go to the lead, and the Welsh guy catches it without a Wallaby within 2 metres of him either side. Now, these things are basic things, and what I don't get, and my starting point is that Eddie Jones is a brilliant coach. No doubt about it. In his time, he's been the most accomplished coach that ever lived. Quite seriously, in rugby union. He, in 2003, coached the Wallabies to get to the World Cup final. 2007.
Don't remind me about that World Cup final, Pete. I'm still,
Okay.
my heart still hasn't recovered from Johnny Wilkinson.
But the resume, he's assistant coach to the Springboks in 2007. In 2015, he coaches Japan to beat the Springboks. In 2019, he coaches England to humiliate the All Blacks in the semi-final and admittedly lose to South Africa in the final. But, you know, of all the coaches in all the world that have ever lived that have coached in rugby, there is nobody that's got a resume of success that's even close to that of Eddie Jones. He is a great coach. But this year, it just simply not only hasn't worked, it's just been catastrophic. And so, as I wrote about this in the Herald the other day, that as sort of these stuff's going along, where you see, you know, constant chopping and changing and leaving Michael Hooper and Quade Cooper behind and picking the youngest team, I think I've got this voice, you know, saying to me, this is a bit odd, but look, this is Eddie Jones. He knows 10 times more than I ever will. And then we've got five captains in 6 matches, and I'm thinking, geez, that seems a bit strange to me. But look, this is Eddie. He'll know what he's doing. And when we got to the end of the Welsh game, it all came crashing in on me. This has been every bit as mad as I think it is. And I don't understand why a coach as accomplished as Eddie, as good as Eddie, as brilliant as Eddie, with a force of personality as strong as Eddie, has coached a team that doesn't call out mine when the ball goes up.
It's pretty astounding with a scoreline of 40-6 against Wales. Admittedly, you know, a very good team in this day and age, a team that traditionally we would have expected Australia to flatten. Do you think it's possible that after all this success, after essentially bucking conventional wisdom in other jobs, backing himself and being vindicated time and time again, do you think it comes to the point where you just trust your instincts and don't listen? I mean, his record this year has been 1 win, 7 losses. So the rot was setting in even before the World Cup started. It's just baffling that it's gotten to this point, particularly with a team that, you know, very few people knew at the start of the World Cup. Like, who are these Wallabies again? Where's Quade Cooper?
Yeah. Well, there's truth in that. As I mentioned, the youngest team, and you know, there's 20 teams here from around the world, and our blokes are the youngest because Eddie basically wiped out the veteran class. But on that question of, you know, where it all went wrong, there is a strange parallel here, and it's one I am expert in, Alan Jones. Now, I
was going to ask, Alan Jones is the one person who would say he had a better CV than Eddie Jones. It occurred to me when you mentioned.
But Alan Jones, I bow to nobody in my bitter criticism of Alan Jones on 100 things, and each one of them justified. But I've always stood to Jones his due. As a rugby coach, he was brilliant. He was a professional before his time. He extracted from us a professional performance without money changing hands. And so for the first 3 years of Jones's tenure, the Wallabies barely lost. I suspect, you know, the win ratio was probably something like, you know, 80%, which included the Grand Slam. He was a brilliant coach. And then in 1987, he believed his own stuff and he could do no wrong, and he made strange selections and he exhausted the players under him. And I was long gone by that point. But he lost 5 matches in a row. They didn't have a victory. I think there was a draw with Wales somewhere there. But, you know, he went from phenomenal success to crashing down and it just being a disaster. And that's been Eddie. I mean, Eddie's track record in all these teams that I've mentioned has been that his intensity wears people out, but that intensity also gets performance. You know, the stories of losing a test match at 10:30 at night and calling a meeting in his room at 6 a.m. the following day for the assistant coaches, those stories are legion, where he exhausts people. And so, as I put in the Herald the other day, when the news broke that Rugby Australia has signed Eddie Jones, I don't know if I was first into print, but I wasn't far off saying it's a great thing. This is a brutal but brilliant move. There'll be lots of tears before bedtime. There'll be coaches leaving. There'll be veterans wiped out with no politeness, no courtesy. It'll be ugly. But the beauty will come because Eddie will get this team in hand and we will get performance. And nobody saw coming that you could possibly have Eddie Jones with the talent he's got available. And there are talented players in those Wallabies. There are very good players in those Wallabies, but they played with absolutely no cohesion at all. And, it looked like 15 individuals doing their very best, but there seemed no pattern of play that was no pattern successful. And that was another thing, while I've got your ear, Dom, that I always tell the story back in Sydney University 30 years ago. Nick Farr-Jones, the Wallaby World Cup winning captain, was captain of Sydney University first grade for the first 7 matches of the Shoot Shield season, and we won 6 out of 7. He then goes off the Wallaby duties. I take over as captain. I think we lost 7 out of 7. I'm not a good captain. I don't read the game. I didn't understand the game. But I've written biographies of Farr-Jones and John Eales, both of whom were good captains. And the essence of good captaincy, I'd say a couple of things. One is, has to have, like Farr-Jones, this white-hot intensity of desire to win, that if you're on his team, all you can do is try to hold on, to try to get somewhere near his level of intensity. But you need the captain to be just eyeballs rolling, desperate to win. You also need the captain to be what Eales was, that when you were trying a particular method to get upfield that wasn't working, or you were getting hammered, you change tactics. You bring everybody in hand saying, right, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. That's not working. Do this. And what I don't understand, again, is, as I mentioned, against Fiji, 7 or 8 penalties, whatever it was, in that second half, where the player got tackled, the ball didn't come out, or somebody took out somebody standing over the ball, or was offside, or whatever. But it was absolutely crushing that about every 4 or 5 minutes, penalties, Australia not releasing the ball, penalties, whatever it was, where we're pressing their line, they get a penalty. There was nobody there to say, Dom, listen to me, stop this. This is insane. Against Wales, again, I don't have the stats, but it must have been 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, whatever it was. It was let's go with half a dozen. Half a dozen times in that second half against Wales, there was a scrum penalty where we collapsed or something happened, but it just happened time and time and time again, and it just killed us. And another thing, while I got your attention, that I got to the match through the crush of people getting to see Wales versus Wallabies, and I got there, I guess, with 40 minutes to go. As I take my seat, out to the right, I see the Welsh team, each one of whom has a face like thunder. They look like, yes, we are playing for our lives in the most significant match. We've got to win this. We've got to beat the Wallabies. We've got to get through to the quarterfinals. The pride of our nation depends upon it. And they were doing these drills. And, like there was everybody was doing the one thing, whatever it was. Out to my left, I see the Wallabies. And, they're coming out. Maybe there was 15 guys out there when I saw it, just running back and forth and next to each other and various things. And over the next 20 minutes, I guess, maybe they may say the next 10 minutes, the rest of them trailed out until they were sort of all out there, and then they did do a few drills. But the mood was not faces like thunder.
So you're behind from the start.
Well, I was looking at it, and I don't, as I say, I have no expertise in the way modern rugby's played, but I fancy my knowledge of rugby values. And I remember in the 2003 World Cup, I put a piece on the front page of the Herald saying the Wallabies' role in this 2003 World Cup, they are going to be roadkill before the All Black juggernaut. And I'm told the Wallabies put that up on the drawing board, whatever, and said, this is what, the media is saying about us. Okay, we're going to prove them wrong. And mate, FitzSimons looked like a dickhead.
Thank you for your service.
They did.
They nearly won the whole thing.
Yeah, well, they did. Well, but truly, I wrote that they were going to make the All Blacks. They were going to be roadkill for the All Blacks. And I was there, and the All Blacks came out, and they looked good. The Wallabies came out, and they looked like thunder. They were this pent-up aggression, emotion, passion, whatever it was. But from the moment they came out, I thought, these guys look different. You can pick it. I always think in an NRL match, from the kickoff, I reckon a minute in, I've always got a reasonably good idea of who wants this the most. What's the feel? And so for that match with Wales versus Wallabies, I simply have no clue how there appeared to be more tension in the stands of people like me going, geez, this is, we're playing for sheep stations here. If we win this, we get through to the quarterfinals. If we lose, Armageddon's only about 3 stops up ahead. And I had that feeling, and I sort of put it down. No. Eddie knows what he's doing. Eddie will get these guys to perform. And despite you and I chatting for 20 minutes, I hope I've made clear, I have no clue why a coach as accomplished as Eddie Jones, a brilliant coach with a resume second to none, was able to preside over that mess. I don't know what went wrong.
The Chaser Report. News you know you can't trust.
They've got one more game to try and salvage a bit of pride at this tournament. And then in 4 years, we're hosting. We've got the chance to get the home crowd advantage that the Matildas took such advantage of in the Women's World Cup. But rugby seems on the downward spiral at the moment. I mean, it's not just this World Cup. It's lost viewers in recent years. It seems not to have quite the same national attention that it once had in a more crowded sporting marketplace, I guess, with all these other national teams, the women's games coming to the forefront as they have. What do we do in the next 4 years to try and put together a decent Wallabies team? Is there a combination out there that might get us there? Do we stick with the youth now that they've started? Or do we need to just go back to the drawing board, get a blend of experience and some of these new players and just say, you know what, that was a bad year. Let's just begin again, burn the whole place down and start from scratch?
Well, there was a brilliant piece written about this in the Herald today. As a matter of fact, I wrote it. And the theme of it is we do have to rebuild. I think the first thing is you've got to let Eddie go. You've got to say to Eddie, look, we'll write you a reference to Japan Rugby Union. You're a brilliant coach. You're a great
they're
servant.
Asking, aren't they?
Yeah.
Do you believe that he had the meeting?
Well, Tom Decent, my colleague at the Herald's broken all the stories in this field, and he's the one that broke that story about Eddie doing an interview. And I think from memory, there's 3 candidates. The story is Eddie's one of them. And Eddie's associate, his mother is Japanese. I think Eddie speaks reasonable Japanese, but he's the most accomplished coach of the Japanese side they've ever had. The All Black Jamie Joseph is about to stand down. So and Eddie sort of denied it, but if you said to me here, Dom, that if you said in the public airways, I've seen Fitz steal donuts from the school cafeteria, I would say, well, that's just simply not true. I'd be angry about it. I'd say that's just not true. That's absolutely not true. So when it was put to Eddie that you've been doing interviews. This is a press conference after Lyon. You've done interviews with Japan Rugby. Eddie makes 2 replies. One, I don't know anything about that, mate. Well, Eddie, you do know something about that because it's been on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald, so there's a start. It's the talking point of Australian rugby, so you know what we're talking about. And, he repeated it twice. I don't know anything about that, mate. And then the thing is, well, are you committed to Australian rugby? And the answer is, I think the phraseology was, I am committed to Australian rugby. There was nothing about the future. It was careful language that did not include a robust denial. And I can tell you, for a story like that, the Herald does not go to print unless we're damn sure of it. Absolutely sure of it.
Yeah, look, a carefully worded denial is always suspicious in this day and age. But that, as you write in your piece, that may well provide an elegant solution at this point. It is disappointing. I mean,
but the thing is, Dom, you work for the Chaser Report. If you were doing interviews but if you were doing interviews right now for, let's say, Channel 9 or Current Affair, so in the unlikely event that they said we need Dom Knight because his brand of interviewing and comedy and satire is so brilliant that I'm saying this, they'd be unlikely to recognise your brilliance. But if you were doing interviews with an alternative employer while being at the Chaser Report, no problem, because that's the way it works.
Sure.
In the media world, that's no problem. But in rugby union, when you've been hired, $1 million a year or whatever the figure is, around about that, for 5 years, and you're really 7 or 8 months into taking over the reins, and you're saying in the dressing room, you're saying to the players, bleed for the jersey, love the jersey, I'm here to resuscitate Australian rugby. And when I interviewed Eddie in Paris, he said, look, I had to tear it all apart because it's not working. Okay, well, geez, all right, you torn it all down, but let's see it work. Okay. Well, at the same time you're saying that, you're doing an interview for another nation to get employment from them, your authority in the Australian dressing room is gone, mate, and it'll never come back.
Particularly at a World Cup. You can't do that, have it be a distraction at a time like this.
Well, I think legally, I suspect the lawyers will say, and I've got no expertise in this field, although I did study a few subjects of law at Sydney University, but the lawyers would say I don't think there's any suggestion of any breach of contract, but it's at the very least improper. Mate, you're being paid to concentrate on Australian rugby. Having a distraction like that and being seen to look for employment coaching another nation, I mean, it just hasn't worked. And I think the way forward is to say, Eddie Jones, you have been a brilliant servant of Australian rugby. Australian rugby can be proud of your contribution to world rugby over the last 20 years. And as a player, Eddie was a great player for Randwick. He's the unluckiest man alive never to have played for the Wallabies. It just so happened that just as his time came, and I was around at the time, just as his time came to get into the Wallaby side, Phil Kearns came out of nowhere, reserve grade Randwick, to be picked for the Wallabies ahead of Eddie Jones. He should have, he was very unlucky not to be a Wallaby.
From reserve grade, really? Oh, man.
Yep.
Boy.
Yep. And so he has been a great contributor to rugby. He has devoted his life to rugby. He's got a rugby resume of coaching second to no one. However, it just hasn't worked this year.
Yeah.
It's been a disaster, and there's no sign of it being anything other than a disaster on his watch. And you say, one game for redemption. I say, no, Dom. Portugal, it just, they'll beat Portugal.
Out the door before Portugal. Interesting. Well, Fitz, you're there. You could step in for the final game.
No.
You wouldn't need to do much coaching. You just say, when the ball's up in the air, one of you just needs to yell mine.
Yeah.
And when you've conceded a couple of penalties, because this is what ruins a rugby game, is when there's a string of penalties. We all know that. Maybe don't do the thing that keeps giving away the penalties.
Well, there's that. My point on Portugal is they could beat them 100-0. It won't change anything. Yeah. The only thing that would be significant out of that game would be if they lost. And Portugal's not nothing. They are really not nothing. They gave Romania, they gave Georgia a good game. They've had a real go. And they've got some good players. As a matter of fact, somebody I know very closely is about just taking a position as their coming coach. So we'll see what happens there. But
I'm now terrified we're going to lose to Portugal.
No, we'll beat Portugal. But look, it's just, we've got to say to Eddie, there's got to be a way to say, give each other a hug and everybody move back to their corners and we start to rebuild Australian rugby. I would ask Robbie Deans to come back, possibly Steve Larkham, possibly Darren Coleman. If Robbie didn't say yes, then you'd go straight to Steve Larkham or Darren Coleman, who coaches New South Wales, who's very highly regarded. He hasn't yet achieved great results for the Waratahs.
Well, Larkin was a genius on the field. Him I remember very clearly with the headgear.
Steve Larkin. Yeah.
Does he wear the headgear as he coaches?
Right.
I think he should.
He probably should. All right. Thank you, Dom.
Thank you for venting. Look, we'll offer Eddie Jones to try and lure him away. We'll get him as deputy rugby correspondent for the Chaser Report in the event that you're not available. Thank you for your time, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. But look, 4 years to try and fix things, and won't it be amazing if they manage to pull it together on home soil, given the terrible, terrible World Cup they've had.
You can read about it in the Sydney Morning Herald. Thanks, mate.
All right. Thanks, Fitz. Our gear is from Road. We're part of the Iconoclast Network. Catch you next time.